It's a common occurrence for video games to receive a massive surge of hype upon release, but immediately fall off shortly thereafter. We've seen this time and time again with games like Titanfall 2, Anthem, and most recently, Palworld. In reality, most games follow this pattern, with the game getting a ton of hype at release, and then 1 month later, the numbers dramatically drop off until the game's officially declared dead by social media. It's the cycle 99% of modern video game releases follow, and there's nothing wrong with that, as gamers have shiny object syndrome and are always chasing the next best game on the market. But what if I told you there's a game that didn't follow this pattern? A game that's hype quite literally died before even being released. A game riddled with so many development issues, internal scandals, and false promises that it killed itself before even being available to purchase. Today, we are talking about Ubisoft's XDefiant, the Call of Duty killer that apparently is not trying to be Call of Duty while also being marketed as a Call of Duty alternative. We'll cover all the drama surrounding the game's release and why many have been quick to call XDefiant a dead game on arrival. So to understand where all this drama starts, we have to go all the way back to July 19th of 2021 when Ubisoft announced their brand new game they were working on, which was titled Tom Clancy's XDefiant. It was introduced as a free-to-play, fast-paced arena shooter, blending the punk rock lifestyle with a competitive gaming experience. The game promised to feature factions from various Ubisoft franchises such as Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon, Splinter Cell, and The Division, each bringing unique abilities to the battlefield. The announcement definitely generated buzz, as players were intrigued by a new shooter coming to the market, but it also came with a lot of criticism, with many feeling like the game was just going to be another uninspired shooter, with some comments on their official YouTube trailer stating Ubisoft games are generated by an algorithm. Seriously, you can't get any more uninspired than this. And another commenter stating the game isn't even out yet and it still feels like I've already played it countless times. Positive or negative feedback didn't really matter though, as the game had quickly started to trend across social media, thus generating a ton of requests for users to register for the closed beta playtest. The player interest was looking great, as its biggest competitor, Call of Duty, was having one of its worst years ever with their release of Call of Duty Vanguard. This was XDefiant's perfect opportunity to capitalize on a frustrated FPS market looking for a new controller-based shooter. And so, following the YouTube announcement, Ubisoft San Francisco, which was the developers behind XDefiant, laid out their grand plans. They promised a game that was both a love letter to the Ubisoft's rich catalog of characters and a fresh take on the competitive shooter genre. The developers emphasized community feedback, promising regular updates and transparency throughout the development process, something we'll talk about later, but keep this in the back of your minds. Beta tests and gameplay teasers followed, showcasing a mix of fast-paced gunplay, special abilities, and dynamic arenas. Everything the team was promising the community sounded amazing, and they were really starting to build some momentum for their game's release. But this is where things start to get rocky. The first sign of trouble came from the initial delay of the very first closed beta tests. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for large publishers to miss their promised deadlines on game updates, so it wasn't really a big issue at first. Missing one singular deadline isn't a large deal as long as it doesn't become a pattern, and unfortunately for XDefiant fans, this would become a pattern that would haunt people for the next 3 years. Despite reassurances, subsequent updates from the development team became less frequent and less informative on when exactly this closed beta was going to drop. Keep in mind, users were expecting this beta to release in 2021, and they would have to wait until 2022 to even receive update on why the delays were happening. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Months pass with little to no updates from Ubisoft, and the once vibrant anticipation begin to wane. Rumors started to swirl about the development hurdles, but without official word, the community was left in the dark. It wasn't until late 2022 that Ubisoft broke its silence, announcing yet another delay. This time, the reasoning was less clear, with vague references to technical challenges and a shifting competitive landscape. Finally, after waiting what seemed like forever, Ubisoft announced a brand new closed beta date from April 13th to April 23rd of 2023. Although this was nearly 2 years of delays and bad communication, fans were still hyped to get their hands on the new game's beta mode. XDefiant's beta quickly became one of the most top-streamed games on the site Twitch, even surpassing their competitors like Call of Duty MW2 and Warzone. The closed beta definitely wasn't perfect, with some users having issues with weapon balancing, as well as the spawn system, which was a little chaotic at times. But at the end of the day, this was a closed beta, so many were very happy with the current progress of XDefiant and excited to play the full game, which is expected to release in October of 2023. Now before then, XDefiant would have to fix a few minor issues within the game, along with a game-breaking issue, which was the netcode and hit registration, which seemed to be one of the biggest complaints amongst those who played in the beta. This user went to Reddit giving his feedback for XDefiant, stating, "The netcode and the hit registration needs to be better. Oftentimes, I'd empty an entire clip into an opponent while keeping my shots on target, only to die to someone whose shots actually registered. I never got around to playing the closed beta, but I've read that a lot of work went into the hit registration from then till now. It's still not enough. If this game can't fix the issue, it's dead in the water." Unfortunately, these issues wouldn't be fixed anytime soon, as behind the scenes drama was unfolding with the Ubisoft team behind XDefiant. A popular journalist and leaker named Tom Henderson broke the story around a troubling narrative surrounding the development of this game. He stated that after talks with a few unnamed employees at Ubisoft, there was a group referred to as the Boys Club. Now, contrary to what the moniker might suggest, this group isn't exclusively male, and it actually includes a few female developers. This group, however, is unified not by gender, but by the outsized control and influence they exert over the game's development process. Apparently, the Boys Club's dominance within the project has had far-reaching and detrimental effects. Members of this clique have been described as disregarding the expertise and recommendations of their colleagues, often opting for garbage changes and overhauls that were not only unnecessary but also counterproductive. These decisions were not made through a democratic process. Instead, they stem from the club's singular vision, which frequently clashed with the rest of the team. Essentially, if a member of the Boys Club wanted to make a decision on the game, it was going to happen, whether the rest of the team liked it or not. This unilateral decision-making has led to several significant issues. First, the development of XDefiant has been riddled by missed deadlines. Projects of this scale are complex and require meticulous planning and execution. When key decisions are made impulsively or without regard for the project's overall timeline, delays become inevitable. The Boys Club's tendency to initiate unnecessary overhauls meant that the work already completed needed to be revisited or scrapped entirely. Secondly, the culture fostered by the Boys Club has created excessive crunch periods where team members are overworked and even allegedly mistreated for not meeting deadlines set by the Boys Club. The worst thing about this so-called Boys Club, though, is that it has stifled all creativity and morale. When a small group holds a disproportionate sway over a project, it can demoralize those whose contributions are sidelined or undervalued, which results in an extremely toxic workplace environment. With a toxic development team, it's no surprise this game has been riddled with delays and issues, but it wasn't always like this. What most people don't know is that XDefiant was originally called Tom Clancy's XDefiant. This game was supposed to be positioned within the broader universe of Tom Clancy games, which includes well-established titles known for their tactical, realistic military gameplay and storytelling. This alignment with the Tom Clancy brand carries certain expectations regarding game mechanics, thematic content, and audience appeal. However, it was reported that when the decision was made to drop the Tom Clancy name from XDefiant, it marked a significant shift in the project's creative direction. This is because the Boys Club no longer had to follow these strict guidelines set in place for the game, but unfortunately this new creative freedom would ultimately lead to the downfall of the game's reputation. One of the biggest issues this mysterious Boys Club allegedly keeps pushing forward is trying to be a Call of Duty clone. If you played the alpha version of this game, you would know how similar it feels to Call of Duty, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when ideas are being scrapped simply because it doesn't follow the Call of Duty blueprint, you start to have some issues. A source working on the game even stated, "They will nitpick the feature to their liking, similar to Call of Duty, and tell the design/production teams to come back later once they make the appropriate changes. Even once the team makes those changes, the Boys Club will come up with something else and the process will repeat again for months, all resulting in either the feature finally being implemented into the game or being cut entirely." To be clear, chasing COD isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's one of the biggest first-person shooters of all time, so it makes sense. But when features are pushed back constantly or cancelled entirely because they are not COD enough, it has a detrimental effect on those working on the project and the game itself. It seems though that Mark Ruben, the executive producer on XDefiant, is actively trying to fix the game's reputation, giving more and more updates on the game's status. However, this could be all smoke and no show, considering a quick look at his official Twitter account shows post after post apologizing for XDefiant not meeting delays and failing to meet consumer expectations. Most recently, he made a post stating, "We have an update coming soon, probably this coming week. I know we've been silent because, to be honest, there isn't much to talk about. I know people just want to see the game ship, and so do we. I can't wait to ship just so we don't have to talk about ship dates anymore and we can talk about more important stuff like gameplay balancing or new content/modes/maps. Just to be clear, we are not just sitting around with the game fixing every little last bug. Nobody launches perfect bug-free games. We do our best, but it's just not realistic to think that. We had major technical issues that we found right before we launched that had to be fixed." And that's what the team has been working on, and they are not just minor bug fixes, but major infrastructure and full system overhauls. The game remains the same that you played already, which we have strived to make as fun as possible, which we feel confident about. So aside from questions about launch, which I can't talk about, I'm happy to chat about mostly anything else related to the game. Now, some were satisfied with this response, but most shared their frustration, with this user stating, "As a lifelong gamer, I lost all hope as well as hype for this game. The game should have came out back in October and made improvements from the feedback of the game." He actually got a response from Mark, which made for a very interesting Twitter thread, as Mark stated, "Even if you couldn't party up with friends, even if the netcode crumbled under scaling from the number of players, even if you were running around with a bunch of invisible people shooting you, even if you felt like you were constantly hitching, I don't think so." Then another user chimed in stating, "But tell us, how did that happen? The game felt really fine on the June beta. What happened between this until now, which is almost a year later? How did the game just get worse and still not fixed almost a year later? That's what confuses most of us." Mark actually replied to this guy stating, "Part of it was scale. Under small tests, some stuff worked fine, but when you scale up, there were compounding issues causing major issues in those systems. Also, some of the netcode issues were due to increased anti-cheat, which sadly is always always something that hurts performance. Although what Mark said is most likely true, he failed to mention anything about the toxic workplace environment and the many behind-the-scenes rumors that have been glooming over XDefiant, which have most definitely contributed to the delays and the killing of this game's hype. As a massive fan of FPS games, I truly hope XDefiant can somehow revive its game's hype before release and earn back the trust of the community, but only time will tell.